Oh, yeah. Okay. Jatketaan Lontoolla. In English. So, welcome to the stream. We're just setting everything up here. So, Azure and Friends event number 2. Welcome, everybody. My name is Santiago. I work at Lake, part of this Futurice family. That's why we're at the Futurice offices. Firstly, we can look at what is Azure and Friends. Azure and Friends is for making friends with Azure and about Azure. We organize events to share knowledge to everybody and to learn through open discussions in the community. We want to make this easy for beginners and experts alike to come here and to have any type of Azure-related discussions you want. We're independent, seeking to benefit everyone involved in Azure and technologies, and we want to create opportunities for collaboration, so that's why we have the networking after all of the speeches, and we hope to have some nice questions and everything during all the panels. Yeah, still same shit, different slide. But going forward, we would like to thank the host, Futurice, and we'll have just one couple of words from Juhis and the slide.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Juhis. I'm a developer advocate here at Futurice, which basically means I do this most evenings of the week. Super nice that you all joined. It's so great to see actual living human beings at the office in the evenings. Couple of words about the company. How many of you know about us before? Great. So I don't go into a lot of depth, but we build digital services together with our clients. Small companies, big companies, private sector, public sector, anything you can imagine. Web, mobile, cloud, data, machine learning, all the buzzwords, we've got them. Super international. This slide says 42. I think now we have like 56 different nationalities. And like Lake is one of our family companies. We have a bunch of others focused on different things while we do the kind of generic custom consulting with companies. As always, we are hiring. We're especially hiring now for cloud people, for site reliability engineers. So if anybody's interested in switching jobs, talk to me after the presentations and we can find out if there's something good there. We will have some food after the talks. So I hope that you are hungry, because there's a lot of it. I was kind of optimistic about the turnover. So we have a lot of food, and I hope that you help me eat all of that. One practicality, if you need to use the toilets, we have 2 behind and next to the coat rack, and 2 behind me around the corner. So feel free to use them if you need. Let's continue with the actual program.
Good. So here again is the agenda for today. A couple of changes. Roope Seppälä from Microsoft was supposed to be the last speaker today to talk about a lot about stuff about Microsoft, but unfortunately had something else come up and couldn't attend. And we have a small change in the roundtable. We had a cancellation there, so now we have Masi Malmi from Polo Squad joining there. So first, we have the full stack developer roundtable. We'll have a short break after that. Then Teemu Tapanila will tell about how to certify to become a master in Azure. And after that, as said, we have some food and drinks and so forth. We've shared the feedback link in LinkedIn and in YouTube and Twitter. So we'd like to have you spend a couple of minutes to give us feedback. If you're here, obviously, don't have to go to the link. You can tell us if we suck or if we're really amazing. And also, if you want to be an Azure friend, obviously, you're already here if you want to be there. But we'd like to have other people talk about exciting projects, what they do for living, real-life examples. That's always nice. And so contact all of the organizers here. You'll see everybody here. We'll talk about that, or send us an email, reach us at Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And this is the contact details. We have the website, the Twitter, LinkedIn, and we're also the MS Guru Slack. Azure and Friends channel. Okay, but without further ado, we'll have a couple of technical minutes and we'll get the panel set up. Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Is there a mic here?
Tamo. Okay. So my name is Teemu Tapanila, and I will be your host today. So we'll first start by getting to know who are our panelists, who are our developers. So I have one question. Who are you? What are you doing? And name one hobby. And we can start from that side. It's one question, three
subcategories.
Yeah, something like that.
My name is Olli Niskanen. I'm from Relax Solutions. I'm the team lead of the floor planning team and a full stack software developer myself. For my hobbies, I of course like to code. I have a couple of interesting semi-work related, CAD related hobby projects going on online CAD editor draft, and then I play with synthesizers, and I'm really looking forward to getting, for example, Eclipse at the board gaming table again. Did I cover the question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Hi all, my name is Janne Kujanpää. I'm from DC. I'm doing kind of only Azure infrastructure code, nothing fancy like coding, maybe something with PowerShell for CI/CD pipelines. And for the hobbies, yeah, I try to avoid gaming. It is using too much time. Maybe to reading, watching good or bad B-rated movies, and that kind of things.
Hi, my name is Masi Malmi. I'm from Polar Squad, a company specialized in DevOps consulting, but I'm putting my developer hat on now. I have, something like 10 years of previous experience from developing with Microsoft Stack, so I have tried that as well. What do I do for a living? So nowadays I do DevOps consulting, but sometimes I even code. So I do code on my free time. Some hobbies, well, spending time with kids and some CrossFit and running.
Cool. We can start by keep it there. So our main question is, of course, what kind of applications are you doing? What kind of services? What are you building on top of Azure? These days, Azure is starting to be that large that it's very hard to know. Like you can build so many different things there that it's not very clear. Like what exactly are you doing when you say you're building something on top of Azure? So basically, what kind of technologies are you using? What kind of stuff are you building on top of Azure? Who wants to start? Masi, maybe?
Well, I can start. So I've worked mainly with Azure for the past 5 years, and I've used mainly Azure PaaS services in my projects, but that's maybe purely because usually the projects have been quite focused. It's been some specific solution that we've been building, so it has made more sense to use PaaS services. So I haven't worked in a product company like Relax, where it's very different. So I'm sure Olli will share you what technologies they use there, but yeah, I haven't used, for instance, Kubernetes in my projects so far. databases, queues. Okay, well, I've used many of the services in Azure from the PaaS side. App service, storage, API management, application gateway, a little bit Azure Functions as well, but I've tried to avoid using functions. I just don't trust them enough yet. API management. I don't know. How long do you want me to, or should we?
No, I think that's enough.
Yeah.
We can keep on going. But because I think like that's a very, I think that's very strange view is that if you're talking to consultant, they have basically used everything because there has been always one project where you have used it, and the huge difference is that we normally the consultants don't go that deep into one specific product maybe, where when you're building a product, you go very deep into the selected stack. I would say, yeah. Please go on.
Yeah, so I have been lately working with data-related projects. So there has been things like Azure Data Factory, Azure SQL data warehousing, of course data lakes. Then we have extended actually the Data Factory with Azure Functions because it is cleaner and cheaper than to use, for example, Databricks or something else that is really expensive and it is designed for work that actually will scale with the CPUs. But the thing we need to extend is like to create that authentication signature that has, for example, timestamp, and it is really hard to do with Azure Data Factory. Or actually, I don't know. I just listen what the people who are actually coding with it are saying. I just help them to build, for example, correct services to build the thing they want to do. And what we have here, Azure Container Instance. Yeah, that is something I suggest that everyone should avoid. At least, at least if you are using something else than simple HTTP or HTTPS, it will fail. And of course, we have some virtual machines because we need different kind of gateways, for example, for Data Factory and for Power BI data movement. And nothing fancy like queues or events or things like that.
And I think Microsoft themselves, they recommend to avoid the container instances nowadays.
No, they don't.
For very specific purposes,
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, at RELX we have a lot of Microsoft services in use, and I can maybe speak about what I've been working with the most. I don't know everything because the platform is by this time pretty huge, but we're currently migrating roughly 50 microservices to Azure AKS Kubernetes based like platform. The platform is partly built in-house and you know using a lot of the managed services from Azure with custom connectors where we can. So, for example, databases, we mostly don't want to host them ourselves. We have Azure MySQL or in some cases SQL Server running. We of course use Azure Blob Storage instead of trying to get a high high efficiency, high reliability blob storage of our own. Although we do run that on premise outside of Azure, but still it's much easier when somebody handles that for you. We use RabbitMQ that we, if I remember right, have a managed instance running, and then there's Redis and one NoSQL database called RavenDB that we decided to try building a small cluster on top of the Kube platform ourselves. So that's roughly the stack. There's a lot of networking stuff, a lot of let's say DNS management that just gets handled by the platform that I'm not an expert in. That would be the DevOps team, but we're developers here, all right?
Yeah. So my next question would be like, what is the one thing that makes you smile? Like one thing on Azure that really works, that you're always like, yeah, this is how it should be. This is great. At least one thing.
Well, I started using Azure, I think sometime 2015, 2016. So I think one thing has been the speed of development. So the back then it was sort of a clear second big compared to AWS. We had some regulatory things to point us toward Azure, and it was partially clunky. I filed a couple of bug reports. I ran into issues that many other people were complaining about. But one by one, those have been gnashed down and eradicated. And it's still a lot the same with new services. But now it feels like when I run an application, I write a couple of pages of YAML, and I have a running application, and that's the best feeling you have as a developer when infra just works. And I think Azure today, it's already providing that.
Sorry, I can't lie. Well, the bicep is actually good as addition, and nobody should not anymore use ARM templates when creating infrastructure. We can, of course, start to talk if bicep is the correct one or should we use Terraform. But anyway, bicep is at least my opinion about it. It is good addition, and there has been promises to add some providers, for example, to create easier workflow with Azure AD, because that's normally is not handled by the ARM management plane. So there will be some magic. Maybe they release it soon or not. And what else? Well, I
think that's enough. Yeah.
Well, I think there's one service I've worked the most with is the Azure App Service, and I think it still delivers. I think it's one of the most mature services in Azure. And standard instance.
Why would you use standard?
Well,
so you're always using premium version 3. I mean, nothing else.
you don't anymore. It's just they changed the pricing.
Yeah.
Now you can use the also, I think, basic even with VNet integration and private links. Well, actually, that's another thing that brought a smile to my face is the private link, the whole feature that it's now possible to basically use Azure PaaS services with private IPs. I think that's one major thing that came in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that the private linking is one of the nicest addition to all of the PaaS services. That basically became because of the whole JEDI deal. So the US government starting to use Azure. Basically, the requirement was that every PaaS service needs to support that. That's why basically it became a thing. I think it has been a huge addition. I personally I think Azure websites and Azure storage are the most nicest service. Like, there is rarely problems with those. At least that's my personal thing. So then, the other side, what has made you really be very angry that it didn't work? Something that you'll be shouting out loud that, hey, what is wrong with this platform?
Bicep. Well, I have explanation for that. It is really hard to share, for example, naming between multiple bicep templates. So you can write them into the parameter file, but then if you have environment names, you need to change that parameter file. That is something which is done better in the Terraform, and it just makes me so sad. And the other things, yeah, they talked about the private link. Yeah, it is nice, but there is still so much things in preview. For example, static IP addresses for the private link. Static IPs are still on preview. And of course, if you want to name the NICs it is also in the preview. So some things are kind of slow to come from preview to GA.
So that's pretty pointed question. What made me shout out loud and blame Azure? Nothing ever. But then things I want to gripe about. There's the incident they had with Cosmos DB, and that was a bit of gray hair. Nothing in production for me, luckily, but I still went through all of the test and evaluation databases we had at my then startup and checked that, okay, is there really nothing important here? That was annoying. And this is more a personal gripe. I've never learned AD well, Azure AD. Or Microsoft AD or any version. So whenever I open the page to manage who can access the services, that's a horrible experience. They need some non-Windows IT person tutorials on go and click on these buttons and then it will work.
Well, there was one incident I guess I must mention with Azure API management a couple of years back. So we had a fully working setup with end-to-end SSL encryption with application gateway and then API management behind that and with the VNet integration. And everything was working on Friday, but then during the weekend something broke. And then on Monday when I start to investigate it, then it turns out that it has been Microsoft doing just some regular updates to Azure regions and things that just break down by themselves. So then it's nice to start cleaning up things when you come back from the weekend.
Yep. It's nice that people don't have too many. Like I'm very disappointed. I would say that you're not blaming the platform enough. If you look at the internet discussions or GitHub or Stack Overflow, there's always like, why is Azure doing this stupid thing or that stupid thing? Why is it working like that? Why isn't it working like that? I would say the number one, which I've seen a lot, is API management. That if you want private networking on API management, you need to go for premium, which is what, 4,000 euros a piece. So I see that as a number one complaint.
I can add to that they don't also tell you that if you need real high availability for the API management, you need 2 instances in different regions. And since the other instances in another region, you need to basically duplicate your networking as well in the other region.
Yep.
Very simple.
Yeah, so there's lots of that kind of stuff. Oh, you have something to add?
Another thing that just popped to my mind when you talked about the Microsoft attitude. We had a minor incident, some downtime a couple of weeks back, and this was news to me. But Microsoft, they have a nice SLA and support and everything. But apparently, if they run in production a fire drill and break something, that's not covered because it was an intended downtime. They just failed to inform us about.
Okay. That's an interesting news. Fire drill. What is a fire drill?
I have no idea.
Nice. So, yes, experience running stuff in production. Because it's always very fun and nice when you're doing development or test environments. But when you go into production, it's less fun when stuff breaks. So, experiences.
Works exactly like on my machine every time. I've never had a good experience running stuff on production. It's always so on thin ice, and Azure I think is equally good as like running our own infra or running on AWS or running. Well, I guess you could avoid this by not going to production, but it's not tied to Azure. It's tied to customers actually wanting what you build, which is a good thing in the end. It's just you need to be a bit mindful about not bringing down the services, and of course having a plan for what do you do when you do bring everything down.
So everything has been fine and for us in production, and the only problem has been caused by IT changing things or developers not doing their job properly. And the biggest issue I have had in production was with Key Vault. So I was doing my first deployment in the subscription, and my deployment process was using secret from Key Vault, and it took 7 to 8 hours that the ARM deployment backend could fetch the key from the Key Vault. It was working from CLI, but not from the deployment. And that has happened for me maybe in 3 different subscriptions. And we probably can discuss more about this thing in the bullet number 11.
I've had mostly good experiences, but that's probably because usually when I'm done with the project, I change customer or jump into some other thing. But I have had to come to rescue a customer afterwards when I've left the thing to Indian third party who's been doing the maintenance. And yeah, but even then it was not the fault of Azure. It was actually the third party who had been messing things up. So yeah, no, not really complaining about Azure on that front. Yeah.
I personally find it very interesting that I think I currently have more than 10 projects that have been running for 5 years, and we haven't done a single change on the environment on Azure, which I find super interesting that they're still up and running. I don't think that they should be, but that's a totally different discussion. But they are up and running. And they are serving customers really well. So then a little bit about pipelines. So there is always, when people are using Azure, they always start with the portal, and then there's always trainings that, for example, I do, and I always say don't use production, like don't use Azure portal for production. So pipelines, are you using pipelines, or are you right-click publishing? What is your current way of doing, and do you think that is the right way to do? And Masi can start.
I can start. Well, that's what I do for my work most of the times, either building a pipeline or designing the DevOps architecture, or how the infrastructure and how to automate things. So yes, I always start from the EAC side. But of course, you need to test things out from the portal from time to time. But I've used enough of the services that I can just start from the EAC side. But of course, doing these blue-green deployments or these kind of things becomes more complicated if you use or if you build something very custom that you are maintaining yourself, like your own API gateways or these kind of things. But I haven't had to deal with those myself. So yeah, definitely using pipelines and trying to do everything as a code.
Yeah, same thing. Everything on pipelines. The portal is good tool when you are experimenting with something, or you need to find out what the portal does, and you need to replicate the things portal does in with Bicep or with Terraform.
That's not always.
Yeah, that of course requires that you use your browser's developer tools to see the actual API requests the portal does. It might be funny thing to do at the beginning, but as soon as you notice that the portal does like 5 to 10 requests to different API endpoints, then that's not funny anymore. And yeah, everything with pipelines and code, maybe something with PowerShell commandlets or the Azure CLI.
Yeah, so we have a decent pipeline thanks to the guys at Polar Squad. The Q platform, they help us kickstart, and it's deploying to dev. We have a pretty traditional customers at retail that are change management focused, and they want testing reports and a 2-week beta period and this kind of process. But at least as far as developers are concerned, it's quite nicely automated, and well, Kubernetes of course does a lot of the heavy lifting in updating the actual service, and spinning up and down infra pods and what have you. But then that's not really Azure. It's AKS spins up the Q platform services, and then after that you could do the same in pretty much any cloud environment. There's a point about Helm and AKS. We do use Helm quite extensively for templating between different environments, and that's been somewhat painful in that well, it works in development, but then there's this. It's probably more a social and human issue than a technology issue, but somebody would need to go and update the template or the variables for every single environment, and sometimes it's I have been a bit bad about documenting what a specific variable does. So what should this be in production, where we have completely different workloads than on our dev environment with a handful of developers developing against it. But yeah, it's the technology works. I quite like it, and having tried Customize and having tried Sed to manage templates, Helm is, I think, the best out of those three.
Nice. Yeah, so next one is a little bit strange, is that performance. Have you been happy with that? And you were basically before saying a little bit about app service pricing being too heavy or something like that. I personally think the app service pricing per what you get for it is amazing, but that's my personal thing. But I mean, that always depends what are you running on top of those services, because some services are very expensive to start, but then if you use it for massive things, it doesn't really like the price doesn't go up with it. But certain services are just very cheap to start, and then when you start really using them, they get very, very expensive. So what has been your experience with Azure pricing and performance?
Yeah, that's a funny take on the question. I always thought that the performance is exactly what they say on the docs, and you just need to check the limits. But if you take the pricing angle into it, it kind of changes the question. There's this AWS cloud architect guy, Corey Quinn, who has a he's prolific tweeter, and he says that it's sort of for every cloud provider, it's like a game that they will help you play. How do you optimize the pricing? So you need to find the cheap services that offer good performance, and then avoid the money sinks. Like his favorite example is AWS managed NAT gateway, and I guess Azure has similar. Like we did a cost analysis on, for example, Cosmos DB, and then ended up thinking that okay, we will pay for a 10-person DevOps team to host our own infra rather than try to scale this. So you really need to like think about the workload that you're having, and for a 4-person startup, the $70 for a production, SLA for an app service, that was too much at a time. Of course, you get a lot for it, but if the option is running a $10 VM, then you know which one I'm going to choose.
Yeah, the performance and pricing. I have one service in my mind, and that is Azure Firewall.
Yes.
It is really hard to recommend using that to the customer, especially if they want that the firewall is dedicated in the every environment. And well, otherwise, some pricing is kind of steep. For example, SQL data warehousing, even the cheapest tier is kind of expensive, and well, you won't run it for hobby projects.
Performance. Well, I've mostly worked with like public web applications, so most of my experience is from that side. And on that front, I've had both like server-side applications, like .NET, basically .NET-based applications and web applications, and then single-page applications. And from those projects, I remember I've been doing also, well, the customer has been also requesting to do proper load tests for the service before they are like ready to launch and go live. It's been like a hard requirement to do those proper load tests. And well, with those load tests, I've discovered also that you always need to do it because you never know how the solution is going to scale. But I think one thing or one area where this should be about happy, but I forgot to mention what I also not been that happy is because there hasn't been good options for DDoS protection before in Azure. But now we have the Azure front door, but sadly that's not very mature yet. So it's not on the same level as CloudFront, definitely, but it's coming. But on the performance, haven't had any real issues with the web applications themselves, but then with API management, for instance, or application gateway, if you use those WAF features, they can become real bottlenecks. I mean, the performance of the services really can degrade if you use the WAF extensively in those.
Yeah. So overall, pretty happy, but I think it's always about and why pricing. Because I think like when you compare cloud is that it's like you can get as much, like if you just scale it with the slider to the right side, you can get as much performance as you want. But then of course the pricing is always normally very, very increasing heavily. So I don't think it's very fair to say like, do you get performance? Like, of course it depends how much money you put in.
We ran out of slots on another project. In Relax Plan, we went to Dell and asked to so what is the most amount of RAM that you can give us in a machine, and it's more than they have on the public cloud. So
another nice thing in Azure is that most of the services also have extra versions. So if you need something extra, there is normally a way to provide that. But normally the pricing is obviously a little bit extra. It's not like it's not like, oh yeah, we give it 10% more pricing and you get nice stuff. It's more like 100 times or 10 times the price and you get nice stuff.
Do you really want your own data center? You probably don't.
Yes. So the next question is all about developer environments. So I'm going to combine the next two questions. Basically, what is your favorite tooling and especially like also like local environments, because I think those two become together. Is that if you're local, like if you prefer some local tool, do you also prefer local environment, or do you prefer something cloud-based or something like that? So favorite tooling and then local dev environment.
So the tooling, VS Code and Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. Do you need something else? Yeah, Masi said Terraform. And yeah, that's the basic tool set, and using the connection to Azure from the CLI, nothing fancy on the IDE. Well, there is also question about JetBrains Rider. I have not used that, but when I was doing that one C# project, I tried Visual Studio for Mac, and the experience was really awful. It is not Visual Studio. It is something else built on top of web tools. I don't remember if it was Chromium embedded framework or Xamarin-based tool. So the local development environment, well, there is not really much for me to say. I just run the commands that developer has written and it does something. For the infrastructure development, there really is no any local tools to use. Just install your CLI tools and hope they are still working. Because the Azure PowerShell, which is my main tool when doing interaction with Azure, it has been broken at least 3 times in last year window. So it is not funny when you try to run your old pipeline and it just says error and nothing more. So I also should do version pinning with Azure CLI and PowerShell tooling, but well, it is still missing. But in the pipelines, I have the setting to select or pin the Azure PowerShell version just to avoid those minor errors which might come from the bugs.
Okay, well, I also use VS Code mainly. I haven't needed Visual Studio that much anymore, so I could switch to Mac actually for the first time in my life this year. In local development, I like to use containers in Docker, Docker Compose, and then some emulators like the Azure Storage Explorer and for Cosmos DB there's also an emulator. But sadly, that doesn't work on M1 Mac. So for that, I had to switch to Windows to get it working. But it should support soon that ARM as well. Never needed one. How about setting it up? Yeah, I've been writing Docker files or continuing what the developers have done or what they request. I help them setting it up. Yeah, it's quite simple. I think Docker works nicely because it's cross-platform.
Yeah, so the favorite IDE, I'm a Mac user, so it's Writer for .NET stuff, and then VS Code for anything that's not compiled, like Terraform or kubeconfigs or what have you. So then the local development environment it's quite painful at the moment. If you're developing a new feature for a microservice and the unit test pass and you deploy it and everything works, then you know, great. That's amazing and as it should be. Sometimes, you know, running it in Docker exposes some weirdness, and that's fine as well. It's an additional step, and we don't right now have a good script to run with the debugger at that. So then it becomes log debugging or figuring out how do you get writer to connect to a running container, and then it's 4 hours into a rabbit hole. But then for those really nasty bugs between the services, in the worst case, I have 5 microservices running with MySQL, with Azure, with local RabbitMQ in a container, and after 5 instances, event writer starts to become sort of slow. So it's I'm looking for alternatives basically, and something like running a local Kubernetes or Docker Compose with the dependencies included might be interesting. I don't know how the performance would work, but especially for newbies joining the company, that would be much easier than saying that, okay, here's how you run the front end, here's how you run the gateway, here's how you run this service. By the way, this service also needs the queue, and some of the SignalR traffic is going through this third service that you need. So it starts to become a lot for a newbie to learn. I'm interested, do you have a vision for how this is going to be solved?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different schools. I personally don't prefer local environment. Like it's such a hard thing to start setting it up, especially when you start using blob storage, SQL databases, service bus, event hub. I mean, the stack just grows. And at some point you're like, if we want to make a local copy of this, we need to switch all of our services. And then it's like, why would you have a different local environment and then your production environment? And then you start having this, oh, it worked in my Kubernetes emulator, it worked fine, or whatever issue is. So what I normally suggest, which is pretty interesting, is that we set up a developer-based off of those dependencies that make sense. So for example, service bus, we have an own developer-based service bus, and as much as we can. And that has worked well. Most of the cases where we have built that kind of system, they have had like a very few dependencies or small teams, or they have shared the environments. And that worked really well. So for example, like we have one application where there is a very heavy front end. So what we do is that we have a database per developer. So they have a full copy of the database in Azure because we just don't want to run it locally at all. So they just run it. The local environment is all about the web, and the whole backend is just basically sitting on Azure. So that's how we have solved it.
So how do you debug?
So we normally debug only the one piece of them. We don't have issues with the other pieces because they're real microservices which are contained, and only when they have issues only on those. We normally don't have that many layers, like larger pieces that have issues together. They normally happen more like this, like a smaller pieces that are interacting with those. Because, for example, like you don't debug Event Hub. Either Event Hub works or it doesn't work. You cannot debug it, or a service bus. Pretty simple.
Yeah, we have a example of that basically cloud-based local development where a lot of times I don't want to set up test data into my local dev environment because the script sucks. So then I go and connect to the dev database that's already populated with all of the nice edge cases. And of course, there's 5 other teams doing the same. So you run into okay, I run some migrations, and now it's like one service is down for everybody. But luckily, it's still somewhat contained, even though it's not perfect microservices. It's rarely affecting other teams.
Yeah, and I think that is very depending on what exactly are you doing, how large your system is, what is your blast radius when you screw something up. Because like, for example, like I hate Azure AD B2C. Like whenever you're doing changes with that, it's never alone, and it's always affecting a lot of people. So every time that I run Azure AD B2C update, I'm like, let it work. And even if we have tested it multiple times, it's always very, I would say, painful, the whole process of like updating it. I still love the service. I would not replace it with anything else, but I still don't like doing updates on it. Luckily, it's normally like you do it once and then you forget it, and in 2 years' time you do it again, and it still works, and everything is good. Yeah, good stuff. Really recommend it. Then one thing, if you could change one thing or have a new service on Azure to do some very specific thing, what would that be? Totally freedom. Anything you can imagine.
This is maybe coming off of the last two questions or the last discussion, but actually thought about this even before this. But it's maybe a more integrated development environment, cloud-based development environment initiative from Microsoft. So we already have instances where you can run some service in a container in Azure and then connect your VS Code and debug remotely like you could as if it was running on your own machine. We have instances with VS Code running on iPad, and basically this like IAC thinking means that most of or usually all of the config needed for a development environment is already in a YAML file somewhere. So it would, in theory, be possible to spin up and down development environments based on need. So okay, I'm developing this. I'm on my iPad. I'm connecting to a cloud-based VS Code instance and typing up, okay, I want to run this, and a container plus RabbitMQ plus a database spins up somewhere in Azure. I do a GitHub merge request, and my developer colleague can click on a link and then open up the same environment and check how it's actually working. And this would be a pretty nice thing. And I think that Microsoft might be going for something like this. I hope so, at least, but we'll see.
So only one thing. Yeah. I probably would like to see better network tooling. So, for example, if I want to check the effective route table or for single subnet, I need to install a virtual machine. That's kind of sad state with it. And then if I want to capture a network traffic which is going into a private link, I cannot do it. And I'm not sure if Microsoft even can do it. So that is the thing I really want to see on Azure.
Well, I guess now that Microsoft made the VNet integration and private link available in the basic also, I would also suggest the same for API management, so that you would have more like cheaper tiers there as well.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if that's not coming, because it's always about priorities, and you can see that if the app service has it, then probably the API management will get it one day. The question is, of course, is the one day this year or next year? We have no idea. Then, last question that I have written before. Support tickets. Have you raised one? And how was your experience on it? I can start by just saying that I raise quite a lot of support tickets myself. Generally, I always had this mind of like, this will be horrible, and I still do it. And whenever it goes smoothly, I'm always like very positively surprised. It doesn't happen very often, so I think it's an interesting experience. But how has been your experience been with support?
Yeah, I've also raised quite a few tickets myself. I think the experience has varied a lot. I think there's so many support engineers on Microsoft side that they have different levels and capabilities. But overall, I've had pretty good experiences. If there's somebody who doesn't know enough, then they pull somebody else who has more experience. And I've been called by the support even during the day many times when I've had like a real issue in production. So I think it works well. Usually it's not in vain when you create a ticket.
So the most funny experience with opening support ticket is the final window in the flow that is saying, please contact to your CSP. So I also have opened some support tickets, and well, one has been closed by the duplicate, and I think everything else has still are being open. So my experience not so good.
What support plan do you have?
I think what kind of plan designations they use.
Depends on the subscription. Developer Premium, Developer Premier Basic or Standard. What's the thing? If you don't know, you probably have a standard.
Yeah, standard sounds like the correct one. So, well, they might call you in the evening 11:05. That happened once.
At Relex, I haven't had to open any support tickets, so we have a team of Microsoft professionals who take care of us very very well, and they have like there's always somebody who has walked into the mines ahead of me, so I've basically come to a nice working platform and just deployed a couple of services there. At this other startup that I've worked with, we had a couple of incidents where just couldn't figure out why is app service misbehaving, and in the end it usually got resolved by just redeploying the service to another instance of app service. And my experience has been that Microsoft is really good at communicating. They will message you regularly. They will even call you if they want to check that is there anything that they can do. But then depending on the support engineer, they might know what's going on, or they might be completely stuck and just messaging you until you give up. And this is a paid plans. For the free plan, I use for my personal projects. I regularly wait about 48 hours before getting a response, and then usually it is, okay, we can't increase your allocation for this virtual machine type. I don't know what's going on there.
Perhaps a pretty okay experience.
Yeah, I think in general the people who are interested in you continuing to pay money. So the customer success people or developer advocates or whatever they happen to call themselves, that they are very proactive and usually also good at finding the support people who know what's going on. So just be a big enough customer, and then usually it will be fine.
One of the key things is that Microsoft is putting huge effort on support. Lately, I would say past 2 years. Their current happiness of customers is amazingly high, which either means that everybody's almost happy, or nobody who's unhappy doesn't basically rate their experience with the customer support. So if you ever get a questionnaire like, how happy were you? It's very important that you feel it, because currently they only have happy customers. So that's an important fact on the support, is that it's very important to feel it in.
The other 90% have been fired because they're not delivering.
Yeah. But yeah, it's important thing to answer those, and they are constantly trying to do those. There is now a new experience which you might happen depending which service you use. There is normally 2 options: contact me by email or contact me by phone. There's a third one now, which is chat. So you can open a chat straight away that goes to support engineering, you can start conversation straight in a real time. And they're trying to increase that experience heavily. So that's why I'm saying, that's why I asked this, is that they are trying to put huge effort on getting support better. But it's always important to try it out and then give an honest feedback on it. And remember to give a feedback, either happy or unhappy. But it's important to do that. Any questions from the audience? Everybody's happy and everybody knows about everything. All right, then I want to thank our panelists. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
And then we will have a small break, and then I will start talking about certifications. Yes. Kiitoksia. Mä otan vaan tosta. Ui. Mä käyn tuolla puolella. Yes. Kummassa puolella mun kannattaa seisoa, niin mä näen streams. Yes. Joo. Yes, kiitos. Kiitos. Okay. No, nyt se tulee. Okay, so we are back. So my name is Teemu Tapanila. I'm a CTO of Mallow. Mallow is Azure consulting company. We only do consulting on Azure. And that's what we do. So today I'm going to focus about talking about certifications and pretty much like why should you certificate, why people don't do certifications, and why certification will be a very big topic going next year because of changes that Microsoft has been doing. So why would you want to certificate, and especially on why you would want to certificate on Azure? It's very easy way to provide or prove basically to people that I have very specific skills on Azure. If you're currently looking at like what kind of certifications there is now coming, there is a very specific Azure Cosmos DB certification. There is Azure IoT developer certification. There is Azure networking certification. There starts to be more and more these very specifics that I know this thing on Azure. And I think this is a very, very good or way better than previously. Previously, there was basically, I'm either developer or IT pro in Azure. And you either know everything or you know nothing. Now it starts to be more like very specific things. And I think it's better because Azure is growing very heavily. So basically, easy way to prove that you know these specific parts of Azure. Another thing is that certifications are always personal. So they are always your certifications, even though you link them to your company or anything, they're always your certifications. They are never company certifications. And nice thing is that most companies give you bonuses or some kind of benefits or like stuff if you get the certification. So normally companies are supporting you very heavily to get the certifications. Third point, customers have started to finally, even in Finland, starting to more ask that people get certifications. They are starting to be like, hey, we would like to get certain people to help us. Are they certified? So helps you win cases, well, helps you win customers. So depending, are you doing consulting or are you doing product development? If you're in a product company, which is doing product development, why would you want to certificate? Basically, it's signal to Microsoft that we are focusing on these things. And you can say that we know about this thing when you have certifications. But it's more, I would say, it's more important if you're doing consulting. If you're more in a product company, then it says basically if you want to go to something else. Let's just say that you're currently doing developer stuff and you're thinking that I would be interested in networks. Yeah, question.
Concrete example of why you want to certify in a product company, it's tied to those Microsoft partnerships. So you need an X amount.
Yep. There was a comment about that there is a very concrete example why you want to certificate in a product company is a Microsoft competency level. And we are going to get back into that because they're changing completely next year, October. And that's why we're going to see more and more companies driving towards certifications. So it's pretty good benefits of like, why would you do certifications? So why people don't certificate? Most likely, the number one, people are fully working on something else. They don't have dedicated time to do certifications. They're more like extra. Hey, after you have done your workday, please go and study. It's like, yeah, I have other stuff in my life than study for exam. So that's, I would say, number one reason. The another one is that people feel that it doesn't bring them value. I already know Azure. I'm known to know Azure. Why would I certificate? That's a very valid point, but at the same time, it's very strange point is that would it maybe hurt, or would it make me worse if I say I'm certified? I don't think so, at least personally. I think it's always a good thing if you're more certified. Third one, they require time to prepare and then time to take them. Basically, the general rule is that you need about 3 or 4 hours physically to take an exam. And then you need certain time to prepare for it. So even if you're very efficient, I would say 2 to 3 days per certificate. And if you want to get, for example, more Azure certificates, we are starting to talk about maybe 10 days a year to get all the certifications. So it's starting to basically add up the more you want to have them. So and the final point, yearly renewal. So today, if you do Azure certification, it's valid for 2 years, and then you need to yearly go and renew it. So it's very, I would say it's a time-consuming also to keep them up to date. And if it's not up to date, you basically don't do anything with it. So it's more like you're making commitment to renew it every year. So then a little bit about preparation for certifications. And there is multiple ways how you can prepare for certifications. Most common ones are that you go to YouTube and watch somebody's, this is how you prepare for certification video tutorial. I recommend those, they're pretty good, especially ones that have been more views and have more ratings. Personally, what I like to do is that I go to Microsoft Learning page, I find the certification that I want to do, I go to the section which says Certification Skills Outline PDF. I download that PDF document, and every exam basically has this. And then it has these sections. So this is an Azure networking certificate. Anybody here has an Azure networking certificate? One person. All right, so everybody else, you should get it. Personally, I'm going to go and do this in 2 weeks, I think, depending a little bit how my Kubernetes certification goes first. But this is pretty interesting, is that if you look at this, the first topic, manage hybrid networking and implementing them. Okay, that's 10 to 15% of the area. Okay, looks pretty easy, I know that. Then it's designing and implementing core networking infrastructure. I have no idea what that means, just based on that topic. Then it's design and implement routing, which is 25 to 30%. So if you would need to know one thing about the networking exam, is that you need to know how to do routing, because most points come from that. Then it's secure and monitoring networks, 15 to 20%, and designing and implement private access to Azure services, 10 to 15%. And why there is this like something to something percent? Every exam when you go it, they basically randomly pick questions for you. And this is basically like how large or how small the percentage of the questions can be. So every time that you go to exam, it will be different. So even if I go and tell you that, hey, there was almost no question about private access, you might go to the same exam and say like, half of my questions were about private access. That really cannot be true, but the variety might be pretty large. So if you then go to the PDF, and those previous numbers were from PDF, this is a one topic, which is saying design and implement private access to Azure services. It's basically split into 3 different topics, which is design and implement Azure Private Link Service and Azure Private Endpoints. And then it's about, do you know all of these topics? Then it's design and implement service endpoints, these topics, configuring VNet integration for dedicated platform as a service services. Okay, now you can go through this list and be like, hey, I know most of these things. There's maybe 2 things that I don't know. You go and learn them, go to the next section, do the same thing. Once you're done, you're ready for exam. So instead of like starting always that, hey, I need to start from scratch, I need to spend a lot of time, you can literally just go and open this up, see how many of these things you know, and then go for exam. So if we go back here, we know that to pass an exam, you need 700 points out of 1,000. So we can basically say that even if you don't know anything about the bottom 2, you most likely will still pass. Like if you know nothing about those 2. So if you want to optimize, you can just focus on the first 3 sections and you will pass the exam. So when you're doing this kind of preparations, the important thing is that you never need to aim for 1,000 points. You only need 700. It doesn't matter. Like I, for example, like have lots of certifications. Most of my certification passing rates are 700 to 800. I very rarely get over 900. And does it matter? No. You will never get to see my score unless I show it to you. None of the people who ask me, am I certified IoT developer? I don't say like, oh yeah, I got 702 points from that thing. Like, never. So that's why, like, optimize for the passing. Pretty simple, right? And I would say that this is like, why would you do this? With this, you can minimize the amount of time that you need to spend on learning. You also minimize the time that you think that I don't know about this topic. From this list, how many of you would think that you know more than half? Most of the people. So I would say most of the people would also pass the exam if you would go do it today. So if you want to get certifications and if you want to do them, a lot of them are interested on them, I recommend going through this and then just go and do them. Currently, there is a picture of the certification paths. So there is more and more certifications. They always start with basically Azure fundamentals. So if you're very beginning or if somebody wants to get started with Azure, I always recommend doing Azure 900, which is the Azure fundamentals. If you already have a lot of experience on Azure, I would say skip the fundamentals and go for it a little bit harder. And then it's all about like which one you want. If you're doing SAP, I recommend the SAP specialization. If you're not doing SAP, I don't recommend it. I personally don't have SAP certification. I will never have it, hopefully. And I will hopefully never also do SAP. But that's personal preference. Then there is, for example, Azure IoT Developer or Azure Virtual Desktop or Azure Networking. These are very, very specific. And then basically it's all about like what you want to do. So it's either certification based on what you're currently doing and you want to get better at it, or what you would like to do in future. So for example, you would be very interested in implementing virtual desktops. I would just go and certify on it. Most probably you will then land a gig or project, or you can start using those experiences. So we a little bit covered of like why are people certifications. Now basically a little bit about like why companies are starting to put more effort on certifications. Basically, Microsoft has this Microsoft Partner Program. And this far there has been basically, I would say, four different level of partners. There is Silver, Gold, then there is Advanced Specialization, and then Microsoft Certified Partner, or something like MSP. It's Microsoft Specialized Partner or something like that. Very rare companies have either Advanced Specialization or MSPs. Most of the companies are either Silver or Gold partners. And this far it has been basically been that, hey, you need to have 2 people with certifications, and then you're a Gold partner on this specific topic. So now, next October, so not this October, next year's October, there is going to be a completely new program, and there is not going to be any more this Silver and Gold. There will be 6 focus areas, and then there will still be the Advanced Specialization and the MSP. So, if you want to be data and AI specialization, you need to have, first of all, 2 people with Azure Administrator Associate certifications. So it doesn't matter who, just 2 people. And then you need to have 5 people with any of these certifications. For example, Azure Database, AI Engineer, Data Scientist, Data Engineer, Data Analyst. And this is very interesting list is that most companies might not even have a single person with these certifications, because most of these are pretty new and they are very focused on data. And then this is all like these are the basic certifications. Then you need more. You need 2 people who has Azure Solution Architect Expert, and then you need 5 people who has either Customer Data Platform Specialty, which is more dynamics, or you need Azure Cosmos Database Developer Specialty, and you need 5 of these. So if you start like adding this up, that will mean that companies need a lot of people with certifications and very specific certifications. So this is why basically once companies figure this out and they figure out probably this will happen next year, June, or something around that time frame, or September, most companies are like, oh yeah, we are now renewing our partnerships. And then they're like, oh, we need to have a lot more certifications. Yep. So can 5 people fill this list? Yes. But the problem with that is that if you have 5 people who have these certifications, they will also probably have more certifications. Then even if one of those people leave, you will have lots of problems. But most of the companies have a very limited number of people who are doing most of the certifications. So even if you go to larger organizations, they normally don't have like hundreds of certified developers or administrators. They normally have like 5 or 10 or something. But this is now pushing that more into that you will have people who have very specialized certifications. And I think this is the way that it goes, is that currently the bottom one is basically there's only 2 of them, but in the future there will probably be more like, I know Azure SQL, I know Azure MySQL or PostgreSQL, like how those services work. So there's probably going to be more specialized on those certifications. Then there is a very similar list for digital and app innovation. There's basically 6 categories. I'm just going to go a few of them. This is more about basically then digital. The previous one is more about data. This will be more about developer. So this is more like, hey, how many developer associate or Power Platform developers you have? And then it's all about like, oh, you need to have 5 certifications about IoT developer, DevOps, or Power Platform. And this is why we are going to see much, much more push into getting certifications, and that's why I think it will be more valuable to have certifications in the future. So it's a good thing to start thinking about certifying yourself. Any questions on certification topic? Seems simple, right? So now if we go into back in like why people don't have them. Always the problem is basically taking them. And again, finding the time to learn them. If you go back into this list, if you're doing networking, for example, today, if you're at all involved doing Azure networking, I would say my estimate would be that you know half of the things here. Then about learning them maybe 20-30% more, I would say that if we would now spend 12 hours here talking about them, I would say our pass rate would be pretty high. So the important thing is to start focusing on that the requirements are not really that high, and they are not that extreme, especially now that they are very more focused. Before it was more about like, when you had this kind of list, they were more like, oh, you need to know about Azure App Service, Azure Media Services, Azure Signal Air Service, maybe Service Bus, maybe a little bit about Event Hub. So they were all over the place. They were more like 5% of that, 5% of that, 2% of that, 3% of that. Now it's more like contained. So that's why like even though the new exams will be a little bit more deeper, I would say that they're easier to also prepare for. So, go and certify. I would say that's a very good thing to now start thinking about, like, should you certify on your specific topic? My answer would be yes, and this will become more and more hotter topic next year for companies. So if your company is not today looking for getting you certified, they will be looking at that next year. So depending on how busy you currently are, I would say that certification would be a very good point to start thinking about. Any questions? Yes?
Can you still do the exams remotely now that the pandemic is kind of fighting over?
Okay, so question was, can you do exams remotely even though pandemic is over? Yes, even before you could do exams remotely. If you want to do exams remotely, just in case somebody hasn't done it yet, you basically need a laptop and you need a room without the windows, basically. Or if you have windows that you need to have blinds on them, and basically all walls needs to be empty, and that's it. You can do it from anywhere, basically. If you do physical exams, you can only do 1 a day. If you do online ones, you can do 6 per day. And if you want to do very many exams at once, you can basically go to Microsoft conferences, and you can do, I think, 10 in a single day. So if you want to certify it a lot, some people go to Microsoft conferences, the larger US-based ones, or hopefully it's European-based someday again. And then you can do all the certifications at once. But yeah, and remote is I would say even better. I personally prefer the remote. I don't even remember the last time that I've done in-class certification. And that will be going forward is always. Another thing is that if you want to free time, normally it's about, if you book a 1 day in advance, you can pick almost any time. If you book 2 days in advance, you can pick almost literally any time you want. 3 days is then there's literally like every time that you want, there is possibility. So they are pretty okay in a timing wise. Yes. So renewal process. I would say currently renewal process is very strange. I don't think that they currently give any value. Basically, you have unlimited time, and you're going to use Google and internet and friends to do renewals. So if you don't pass a renewal, I don't have anything to say. They are pretty easy currently. I personally hope that they will make them a little bit harder. Because currently I don't think that renewal really brings that much value. But currently they're easy. So currently it's all about basically taking the first exams and then renewal is basically automatic. Oh yeah, true. That might be one view to basically make sure that you Google the new stuff once a year. Yeah. Yeah, so there was a question that the renewal questions are same every time and probably for everybody. So yeah, I think the renewal process is interesting. Let's put it that way. But I would say the exams are getting better. The exams themselves, I think they have improved a lot. There is no more stupid questions there. But yeah, the renewal is. I personally think that is a super strange thing, and I don't know who gets any value from the renewal. I don't think it's the benefit of the people who are taking the renewals or benefit for Microsoft. But anyway, that's a process, and you just need to follow it. There is a certain things that you need to do there. It's more like a ceremony thingy. Any other questions about certifications? Everybody's now going to go and do certifications and certified more. And yeah, another thing to notice is that there is all the time new certifications. So if you look at the current past trend is that there's more and more specialized certifications. Every time that there's a new certifications, if you want to get the certification for free, there's always this trial period, which is normally lasting around 3 to 6 months, which during time you can get the certification for free. But the only downside is that you will not get, did you pass or not? After the exam, you will only get that after the beta period ends. So you get to do a nice exam for free, and then you get answer someday that did you pass or not. It's a very interesting experience. I personally don't like that whole experience at all, but I still do beta exams quite a lot because then you get to be the first one, and then you get a nice certification once you have passed it. So it's a nice bonus. I don't think that there is currently any beta exams available because the Cosmos database was for beta for quite a long while. The reason being is that there is not that many people who took the Cosmos database exam. The same thing with Azure networking because people haven't been that active doing the exams or certifications lately. Don't know why, but that has been the case. Yes?
One thing to point out, it's not really a question as such, but for people who haven't maybe done the certification so much, the provider for those Microsoft certifications called Pearson U, something like that, they actually have an online store called Meetup, where you can buy a voucher for pretty much any Microsoft exam. You can also take that to the practice test. It's I think when you compare those to the Finnish prices, it's about 80 euros extra to get the practice test. I've actually tried those a couple of times. They're really good. I mean, they're like real legit practice tests, not just some brain dumps from the shady corners of the internet. And well, for most people, most likely those are they covered by the employer. So take that into note if you're considering the exam.
I'm going to repeat just part of it, but basically, mindhub.com. you can buy certifications that comes together with the retake and practice exam. There is this kind of package dealing, and they are way cheaper than if you go just buy it directly from Microsoft website. So yeah, depending a little bit of like if you're paying it yourself or if your company is paying, and depending how they're buying the certification, it might be way cheaper to buy it from mindhub.com. Another thing to notice is that if your company is larger than I would say 100 people, there is normally a ESI program, which stands for Enterprise Skilling Initiative, where Microsoft is basically giving you free certification passes. So basically, if you're a large corporation or large, then you will get them for free. Anything else? Also, there is lots of Microsoft-related tutorials and trainings for free. So basically, Microsoft does this, that they have these 2-3 day training sessions online, which basically after you have participated in that, you will get a free exam voucher. So they aim to basically train you on very specific topics and then give you an exam voucher, which you can then use to do it. I think they're running those almost all the time. You need to say that you're joining. I will schedule it basically, I think 2 weeks before they are held, but they're constantly doing those to basically get people certified. So there's a huge push from Microsoft to get people certified. So I would try and take a benefit out of it. All right, so thank you a lot. And then let's end the official session and go for drinks and food.